Will the United States, long the world's superpower, face a sudden collapse like the Soviet Union? This once fringe question now echoes in mainstream debate. Headlines flash, reflecting deep anxiety about America's future. Political division, economic stress, and social unrest fuel fears of decline. The year 2025 is often cited as a symbolic breaking point. Comparing America to the USSR may seem extreme, but some see real parallels: unsustainable debt, polarization, and national exhaustion. Empires, no matter how mighty, don't last forever. To understand these fears, we must separate hype from reality. This video will explore why the Soviet Union collapsed, then examine America's current vulnerabilities. Are the similarities real, or just surface level? The stakes are high, not just for Americans, but for the world. Let's weigh the evidence and seek clarity, not sensationalism. To understand whether America could ever fall like the USSR did, we first need to look back and examine the reasons behind the Soviet Union's dramatic collapse. The Soviet Union, once a global superpower, ultimately crumbled under the weight of its own internal problems and external pressures. The Soviet economy was deeply inefficient, unable to adapt or innovate, and plagued by chronic shortages. Everyday citizens faced long lines for basic goods, and empty shelves became a symbol of stagnation and failure. Meanwhile, massive military spending consumed resources that could have improved people's lives, leaving little for consumer needs or technological progress. Politically, the USSR was held together by force, surveillance, and fear. Over time, belief in the communist system faded, and the government's legitimacy eroded. When Gorbachev introduced reforms like glasnost and perestroika, he hoped to save the system. Instead, these changes exposed deep flaws, and as people began to speak freely, the old order quickly unraveled. Nationalist movements surged across the republics. As the central government weakened, more and more regions demanded independence, fracturing the Union from within. Externally, the costly arms race with the West and the disastrous war in Afghanistan drained the Soviet economy and morale even further, pushing the system to its breaking point. The prosperity and freedoms enjoyed in the West stood in stark contrast to Soviet life, making the failures of the USSR even more obvious to its own people. When Moscow finally stopped using force to hold its empire together, the collapse was sudden and irreversible. The world watched as the Berlin Wall fell and republics declared independence. The Soviet Union fell because of a combination of economic failure, political decay, social fragmentation, and relentless external pressure. It wasn't just one cause, but a perfect storm of crises that brought down a superpower. The question now is, does America face any of these same dangers today, or is its foundation truly different? Turning our attention to the United States, we see an economy that remains the world's engine, driving global growth, innovation, and investment. The U.S. has long been a symbol of economic might, with Wall Street at the heart of international finance and the American consumer powering demand worldwide. Yet, warning signs are becoming increasingly clear, and they're hard to ignore. The national debt has soared past $34 trillion, a staggering figure that raises serious questions about long-term sustainability and fiscal responsibility. The U.S. relies heavily on global investors to finance this debt, a vulnerability that could become acute if international confidence ever falters or interest rates spike. Debt service now consumes a growing share of the federal budget, squeezing out funding for infrastructure, education, and social programs, and making tough choices inevitable. Inflation has surged in recent years, exposing weaknesses in global supply chains and steadily eroding the purchasing power of everyday Americans. Rising prices at the grocery store and gas pump are now a daily reality for millions. Unlike the chronic shortages that plagued the USSR, America's challenge is not scarcity, but price shocks, an outcome of deep integration with global markets and supply networks. Ongoing trade tensions, especially with China, threaten the efficiency and reliability of the globalized economy, raising costs and uncertainty for businesses and consumers alike. Calls for reshoring industries and rebuilding domestic manufacturing reflect growing anxiety about overdependence on foreign supply chains and the need for greater economic security. Still, the U.S. economy is fundamentally dynamic and market-driven, not centrally planned. Its diversity and entrepreneurial spirit set it apart from more rigid systems. Innovation and adaptability remain core strengths, fueling breakthroughs in technology, science, and industry that keep America at the forefront of progress. The Federal Reserve and private enterprise provide powerful tools for crisis management, offering flexibility and rapid response in times of economic stress. While debt and inflation are serious challenges, the resilience of the American system is far greater than the brittle, centrally planned Soviet model ever was. America's challenges are real, but so is its remarkable capacity to respond, adapt, and unite in the face of adversity. The debate today is not about imminent collapse, but about how best to adapt, reform, and strengthen the system for the future. The U.S. must manage its vulnerabilities with care, without sacrificing the dynamism and creativity that have always been its greatest assets. The foundation is undoubtedly stressed, showing visible cracks, but it is far from crumbling. The core remains strong. The real test for America is whether it can enact meaningful reforms and address these cracks before a true crisis hits, proving once again its ability to renew and reinvent itself. America's political polarization is deep and dangerous. Democrats and Republicans inhabit separate realities, making compromise rare. Trust in government is near historic lows, fueling frustration and extremism. The legitimacy of institutions, Congress, the presidency, even the courts, is questioned. Events like the January 6 riot show that peaceful power transfer can no longer be taken for granted. Gridlock prevents solutions to major issues, feeding a sense of dysfunction. Yet, unlike the USSR's brittle one-party rule, American democracy is designed for conflict and change. The U.S. has survived civil war, depression, and upheaval before. Its system allows for self-correction through elections and amendments. The current polarization is a severe test, but not unprecedented. The question is whether America's tradition of renewal can prevail again. Globally, the U.S. faces rising powers, especially China, and a resurgent Russia. Great power competition now spans economics, technology, and military might. Supporting Ukraine and maintaining alliances strains resources and tests resolve. Military spending is massive, raising concerns about imperial overstretch. Every dollar spent abroad is one not spent at home, fueling debate over priorities. Americans are divided between global leadership and focusing inward. The Soviet collapse was hastened by its Afghan war. America's foreign entanglements carry similar risks, but America's alliances are voluntary and based on shared interests, not force. NATO and partnerships with Japan, South Korea, and Australia are sources of strength. Unlike the USSR's captive empire, U.S. allies choose to stay. America's global network is a strategic asset, not a liability. The challenge is balancing global commitments with domestic renewal. The US and the Soviet Union were fundamentally different, not just in their governments, but in their entire approach to society, economics, and the rights of their people. America is a constitutional republic with a market economy, where power is divided and checked. The USSR was a rigid one-party state with a failed command economy, where decisions came from the top and dissent was crushed. The US system is open, flexible, and self-correcting, allowing for debate, protest, and reform. Mistakes can be acknowledged and addressed, and new voices can enter the conversation. The Soviet system was brittle. When crisis hit, it broke. Its leaders could not adapt, and the people had little say in their future, leading to sudden collapse. America's economy, despite debt and inequality, remains the world's most innovative and productive. New industries are born here, and creativity is rewarded, fueling global leadership in technology and science. U.S. legitimacy comes from the consent of the governed, not ideology or force. Elections are contested, power changes hands peacefully, and citizens have a real voice. While trust in institutions is low, few Americans want to end democracy itself. Most still believe in the promise of self-government and the ability to improve the system. The U.S. is not a land empire of captive nations. Its influence is based on alliances, partnerships, and economic power, not occupation or coercion. The Soviet collapse was decolonization, a breakup of an empire. America's federal structure, shared identity, and legal system make a similar breakup virtually impossible. The real risk is not sudden collapse, but gradual decline if problems like polarization, inequality, and infrastructure decay go unaddressed. Change is needed, but the system allows for it. America's strengths, innovation, adaptability, and a strong civic identity are powerful buffers against crisis. The nation's diversity and openness to new ideas help it recover and reinvent itself. The U.S. faces real challenges, but its foundations, democracy, opportunity, and resilience, are far more enduring than those of the Soviet Union ever were. The US dollar is the world's reserve currency, creating constant global demand and giving America unique financial flexibility. This exorbitant privilege lets the US borrow cheaply and manage debt in ways others can't. No real alternative to the dollar exists, despite rivals' ambitions. America's innovation engine is unmatched, leading in science, technology, and entrepreneurship. Silicon Valley, top universities, and a culture of risk-taking attract global talent. This ecosystem drives economic growth and military power. The Soviet Union stagnated technologically. America thrives on reinvention. The national debt is a concern, but the dollar's status is a powerful backstop. China is rising, but the US still sets the pace in critical industries. America's ability to create value is its greatest economic strength. Collapse is unlikely as long as this dynamism endures. America's diversity is both a strength and a source of tension. E pluribus unum, out of many one, remains the nation's promise. Waves of immigrants have fueled innovation and cultural richness. Unlike the USSR, America is built on an idea, not ethnicity. Debates over identity and immigration are fierce, amplified by social media and polarization. The challenge? Can a shared civic identity unite such a diverse population? Historically, American identity has proven elastic and inclusive. Institutions like schools, the military, and pop culture have fostered unity. Today, fragmentation and division test these bonds. The future depends on renewing a sense of shared purpose. Will the US collapse like the Soviet Union in 2025? The evidence says no. America is not a brittle, failed empire, but a resilient democracy with unmatched economic and global power. The real danger is not sudden collapse, but slow decline from unresolved problems, debt, polarization, and eroding trust. The nation stands at a crossroads, not a cliff. Renewal requires fiscal discipline, bridging divides, and reinvesting in institutions. America's strength is its capacity for self-correction and reinvention. The current turmoil is another chapter in a long story of adaptation. The future depends on the choices made now. Collapse is not inevitable. Decline is a risk only if challenges are ignored. The world is watching as America decides its next act.